planning stage, your preparation. So you're writing. You're finding out who are the subjects or the interviewees that you want to have in your piece. And also you're writing what's called a treatment, which I'm going to go over a little bit, but basically a treatment is a written form of what's going to happen in the documentary, or if you're doing documentary work. It seems strange to think like, well, you're doing documentary, shouldn't you go out and document and then edit it into sort of a narrative? With documentary, a lot of times it's not how it works. You usually have to think a lot and plan a lot as far as what you're trying to get out of your piece. What themes do you want to get across? What is the major problems, and what are the sort of ways to resolve those problems? And you sort of want to mark that out, almost as though you're writing a script. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth. But after you do all the sort of planning stage, then you move into production, which is basically the stage where you're shooting stuff.
Putting everyone on camera. Here's a handout.
Oh,
Yeah.
I got that. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Okay. So yeah, we'll move into production then, where basically it's the shooting stage. When you're shooting, particularly for documentary or nonfiction video work, there's two things that make up sort of the shooting process. One is the interview, where you have someone sitting before a camera and you're asking them questions. Everybody knows what an interview is. And then there's something called B-roll. And B-roll basically is the other footage that isn't set up in an interview that sort of is supplementary to the interview. So if someone in the interview is talking about going to a construction site and doing construction work for the first time, you might have them explaining that on camera. But then you have footage of a construction site and people working on the construction site, right? So technically it's like your interview is your A-roll. Your B-roll is that sort of extra footage that helps sort of give an example to the meaning or whatever, what they're trying to get across. And also during the stage, you might be recording audio separately. Sometimes when I work on stuff, the camera guy is out shooting certain things and I have to go record audio from the street or audio from traffic or something like that. So I'm recording audio separately. A lot of the work that we do, though, generally you can be recording audio and video at the same time. But after you're done shooting, interviewing, all that sort of stuff, you move into what's called post-production, which is basically the stage where you're editing. You're taking all of your footage and you're putting it together into your sort of narrative or into your piece. Then you're mixing the audio so it's not too high, it isn't too low, it's at a good level. And then you're getting music and putting that in the piece. And after you're done doing all the editing, you move into distribution, where you're basically putting it on the web, DVD, film festivals, TV, wherever you can get it out to. Yeah. So those are basically the major stages of production, or the three stages of production. Today we're going to talk a little bit more about pre-production, because a lot of times what people do is, we usually hear like, oh, there's a rally next week, we'll get someone to go out and shoot it. And usually what happens is like, all right, do we have the equipment? Okay, we're good, we're going to go out that day and shoot it. Well, that's cool, that's good. But a lot of times you're going to go out, you're not going to be that focused. It's like you're just shooting people who are speaking. Maybe you get someone on camera. The first question people ask is, well, what are you doing here today? You know? And that's fine. You know, you need to get that information about what's going on at a rally. But a lot of times you want to follow what's called a narrative arc. And even and all this planning sort of happens in that pre-production stage. So basically, before you go out and do anything, you want to look at those. Yeah, I'm sorry.
To see if anyone has a question.
Yeah, sorry. I'm like racing through them. Does anybody have any questions?
I did have one question, which was just, I'm sure the timeline varies, but
yeah.
Approximately how much time we talk about from the pre-production to the distribution,
Okay.
or maybe even to the post-production at minimum?
It all depends on the size of the project. I mean, I've been able to like work on things where, you know, we're going to do a short 5-minute video, and you know, we want to get it out in a week. Mm-hmm. You could be able to do that. You can do pre-production over the course of 1 or 2 days, go out for a day or two in production, and then go to post-production and be editing over the course of 3 days. It's a little intense. This stuff takes a lot of time, but yeah, you can do it in that sort of time frame. If you're working on a documentary film that's an hour and a half, I mean, it's going to take a long time. Especially you're going to have so much footage that you're going to have to go through that it's very painful editing. It's extremely because there's so many moments that you like, and like I'll get into it in here, but there's so many things that you like that you're just crunching in,
It's hard.
and it's like they're just not. There's no narrative anymore. It's just like these great moments, but they don't really add up to anything, and you have to start like it's painful, but sort of extracting all the things that are good until you get to that
And
sort of
also,
narrative.
just one part on that, on like how long it takes is,
Yeah.
one reason why it's good to have like a plan at the beginning is that it's like a classic kind of first time or beginning mistake, is like filming everything that could possibly have to do with something, and then you have like 100 hours, and just watching all your footage takes 100 hours, right? And then, so the more footage you have, it actually becomes sometimes harder to edit something because you have to pick through more stuff.
Yeah.
And when you have like something really specific and just that piece, like that's really like, it's actually easier because you're like, okay, I have exactly what I want. I know exactly what I want. Because it can, I mean, this can take, you can do this in a day if you're doing like just one interview and like you did something super easy. The Lord of the Rings or something like that, they spent like years making the Lord of the Rings, so it like really varies.
Yeah.
It's like shooting anything that moves, pretty much, and then
So when you're in the pre-production stage, and I know this is on your paper, but it's like preliminary questions. These are questions you want to ask yourself before you're even doing anything. What is the problem or conflict in the story or in what's the thing that you want to film, right? How is that problem being solved, or how is it dealt with, right? What is your objective or goal with the project? Do you want it to be on television? Do you want it to be online? Do you want it to be for a certain community group or something like that? Who specifically is the audience? Which, if you're thinking about what is your objective or goal with the project, those things sort of go hand in hand. Sometimes when you're putting stuff out to the general public, your messaging is going to be different than if it's in a room with people that you work with, right? There are certain things that people that you work with know and have knowledge of that the general public doesn't. So those things have to be fleshed out. So you have to think about that stuff a lot before you even go into production. And also, how do you want people to feel after viewing? Do you want them to, you want them to take action? Do you want them to, be emotionally moved? What sort of things do you want to get across? What do you want people to do? And also, what theme or themes do you want to explore? Right? And so these are a lot of different questions that will help you determine what's the sort of narrative arc, which I think is on your paper as well. And basically, in all documentary, in fiction, and all sorts of work in storytelling, there is a general narrative arc that every story has. That every good story has, I should say. I'll go that far. And basically...
I'm sure Fellini would disagree.
Yeah. And so with the narrative arc, basically these are the elements of your story. You have what's called at first exposition, which is the history of a person. Maybe you're doing a piece about some individual. What's their history? Where did they come from? Or maybe it's about a movement. What is the history of that movement? What does it come out of? Right? And then during that process, or during the narrative, they're eventually going to hit a problem or a conflict. They're going to have some issue that they're up against, right? And after you find out what the conflict is, you're going to go through a process in the narrative where people are dealing with that sort of conflict in some sort of way. How are they trying to resolve that conflict? Where are they going to? And eventually you hit what is a climax, which is that, moment or apex or whatever, where all things sort of come into focus, where things are, the stakes are the highest. Maybe it's like a big event, a rally, something like that people go to. And after that climax, eventually you're going to hit a resolution. In a lot of the work that we do, there is no real resolution in the sense that like, oh yeah, everything's solved, everything's good, In a lot of ways, I think the resolution can be a new realization that somebody has, or they're able to bring more people into this work, or something like that. It doesn't have to be a kind of resolution in the sense that like, yeah, the problem's fixed. You watch a lot of Hollywood films, the problems are fixed. And then you leave, and it's happy, go lucky too. But yeah, like I said, a lot of our work in a lot of documentary, there is no real resolution in that sort of sense, right? So in a lot of ways, you're going to have to sort of find that resolution. What is it that people learned in the process of going through this? What are things that came out of it? What were they able to solve? What are they still up against, What did they learn that was something new? And in a lot of ways, that can create a strong piece because people can watch stuff like that and it's a little more open-ended. People can sort of get engaged and maybe take action in some sort of way. Okay, so these are the general elements of sort of a narrative. And when you're answering those preliminary questions, you're thinking about these things. You know, you're thinking about what the problem is. You're thinking about who the characters are, and you're going to find that sort of themes are going to come out as you're sort of doing this. And basically, I guess if you flip over, there's a section on writing a treatment. Now, this is basically the most important part. What the treatment really is an elaboration of all these elements into a written form. And that written form is going to read almost like a script, right? So you're going to actually, before you even go out and shoot anything, you're going to think about, what do I want to get across? What is going to be the problem? And you're going to basically write out all these elements in a sort of narrative form. And there's an example here where it says, like, you're going to use simple, non-technical language. You know, you don't have to, like, jazz it up or anything like that. It's usually very simple stuff. But, like, Patty explains how Temple University wanted to gut their contract and silence the union. The film shows nurses picketing in front of Temple University Hospital. That would be B-roll. And we hear Patty explaining what happened at the nurses' strike. This is interspersed with footage of Patty and others at the strike explaining the problems they're facing. Then Patty explains after 28 days they were able to get a fair contract. There's a little bit of an arc there. There's a little bit of a resolution. There's a problem. It's all those elements are there. But that's really sort of one section of what was before a larger project. But it gives you an idea of the type of language you'll use and how you're going to write that sort of stuff out. And then a lot of times when you're writing out that treatment, you're going to find things that your subjects have in them or whatever, and that's going to be placed in sort of the exposition, that you can sort of have it relate to the general conflict. Like, for example, if someone was dealt with issues of exclusion earlier in their life, and then they became a construction worker, and because they were a minority, they were excluded from a lot of construction projects and things like that. You're relating something that's very personal that they understand to something that is a more general problem, and that's going to create a stronger sort of narrative. So a lot of times you want to think about how your subjects in their personal lives relate to those other problems that they're actually facing. And also, just to talk about a treatment and everything, when you write the treatment through, I mean, this is going to sound kind of bad, but a lot of times you'll move into production, and you're going to find when you're out shooting stuff that, you know, everything's changing. It's not right. It's not exactly what's along with the treatment. And that's going to happen in every single project. Things will change, you know. And you have to be sort of open to that. But the real purpose of writing the treatment is to get a really clear frame of what you want to get out of it. And treatments really help with writing questions, right? If you have these things mapped out and you have a treatment written down of what you want, you're going to find that, like, in the section that you're writing about the problem, there are questions that you can ask the interviewees that are going to bring out that problem, or that are going to bring out that resolution, or all the other things that you want to get out that are in the treatment. You know, if someone's talking about, like the nurses example, I mean, when I wrote this up, it was basically, you know, we wrote it up, and then we went to, before we went to interviewing, I looked at it and I thought, okay, so what questions am I going to be able to ask to sort of get these ideas across, you know? And so you're going to have to ask questions about, you know, what was it like picketing? What happened at that strike? You know, what was it like when it ended? How were people acting? All these different sort of questions. Basically, the treatment is going to help you determine those questions and bring you into that kind of, that sort of narrative. Yeah. I'm not sure. Yeah, there's probably questions or something.